in Brighton on April the 15th and Bristol on April the 29th. Well, in churches, temples and mosques, they preach about the dangers of sin and the rewards of keeping to the path of righteousness. But not all religious people are good, not all good people are religious. There have been many humanitarians and philanthropists who are agnostic or atheist, from the philosophers, the aforementioned David Hume, John Stuart Mill, to Microsoft's Bill Gates. The list is long. Do we need religion to create a moral society? Dr. Stephen Lowe, do we need... Stephen Law, I do beg your pardon. Do we need religion to create a moral society? That's the question.
Yeah, I don't believe so, no. If you look at China, for about 2 millennia, it was a very moral place. Their morality was based on Confucianism, which was a secular, non-religious doctrine. And yet you find more or less the same moral codes. You find the Golden Rule, do as you would be done by, for example. Confucius, that was his message too, not just Jesus. So you find societies that are very moral, that have similar levels of morality to religious societies, such as Europe under Christianity. So it's just a straightforward counterexample to the claim that you can't have a moral society without a religious foundation.
So does morality predate religion?
I don't know, you'll have to ask a scientist. An evolutionary. I think they both clearly have deep roots in our history, and to some extent it looks as if there's a genetic component perhaps to both of those tendencies that we have to be moral and to lean towards religion.
To be pattern seekers, yes.
Yeah.
Bishop David, do you believe morality comes from God?
Yeah. I do, but then I believe in God. So clearly that people who want to live a moral life or create a moral framework can choose to do so without God. What is needed is a framework that human beings flourish, and we know this from our vulnerability as tiny children, with a framework, and that there is some basic understandings of right and wrong, what is true, what is not true, what is the right way to treat with each other. We've touched on that already.
We're not individuals. As we establish week after week, one person's morality is another person's bigotry.
And this is a very common problem today, that we start to make it up as we go along. And it's interesting to talk about Confucianism and the Chinese government's present interest in understanding what is the framework that a human being who's now entered into the free market, who's now trying to aspire to their own house, to their own family life, what is the moral framework? And that's why Christianity is booming in China at the moment, for example, because people seek not only just their ordinary physical and safety needs, but they also need spiritual nourishment. And so the roots of much of our morality today are, of course, and we talked about the law courts as well this morning, are rooted in an understanding that we need a framework, and that people connect that up not just with logic and measurable things, but also with the things of the spirit.
Stephen?
Yeah, I think that what's most important is that we produce good citizens. And the kind of citizen that I would want to hold up as a model would be, say, the kind of citizens who rescued Jews during the Holocaust. Now, research has been done into the backgrounds of those individuals, and it turns out that what really motivated those individuals was not religious belief, in fact. They didn't appear to be much more religious than those that didn't rescue. What marks out the rescuers from the non-rescuers is that they were raised to think and question and think about things from other points of view.
To do the right thing for the right reasons.
Yeah, certainly to discuss openly and not just uncritically and passively accept whatever they were told. Now, you can raise children like that within a religious setting. It's not incompatible with religion, but you can also do it outside of a religious setting. And it turns out it doesn't matter very much whether you do it inside religion or outside, as long as you're doing that. That's the most important thing.
You believe a fear of God is necessary?
Not necessarily. I mean, I actually agree with Stephen that you used the word genetic. Maybe there's a genetic component. That we believe as Muslims that God has actually created human beings with moral understanding within them. So we know certain things are not right, certain things are wrong. So we do have that moral compass within us that we are born with. But human beings and our rationale, which is wonderful, our intellect is wonderful, but it's fallible. We are, swayed by things around us. And if we look at the way society today has become so consumer-driven and so obsessive about happily wasting the world's resources. And, you know, there was a time when our intellect told us it's perfectly okay for a white person to treat a black person as inferior because a black person is inferior. And that was our intellect, that we can treat a woman...
Slavery wasn't a monopoly of white people, though. There's been slavery since time immemorial.
The point is about intellect. That the intellect told us it's perfectly acceptable to treat women as...
Slavery is mentioned in the Quran, it's mentioned in the Bible.
It's not just mentioned, it is overtly allowed within these texts. So it's not certainly within the Bible. So, and that's another part of the Old Testament that somehow gets revised so that we can ignore that whilst paying attention to Leviticus 20. The reality is that I'm not suggesting that we don't owe some debt to, especially Abrahamic religions, for disseminating some very general ideas of what I think are basic humanist principles, and making people who perhaps would not otherwise have obeyed them, obey them. But the fact is now, if we're saying, do we need religion now to be a moral society? I think that would suggest that we are somehow regressive creatures, that we are, instead of evolving, we're going backwards. No, we do not need that.
We are going backwards.
Michael?
We are going backwards. Look at society. Look at our youngsters.
I would need something more specific.
Do you want me to give you specifics, do you?
Yes.
Okay, you look at the rate of youngsters what are now got no husbands, no father figures. The kids what are on our streets who are having children. It says in the Bible that children will start having children.
Can you point to a better time, Michael?
Because they're leaning away from what the Bible
But are we suggesting...
Hang on, Michael, can you point to a better time than now, a golden age, when things were better and there was proper adherence to what you believe in, and society was resultantly better?
A lot of for instance, my grandparents' age, a lot of them, you know, they've been married, you know, the best part of 50, 60 years. They've had one partner. The children are all, you know, they've got the mother there, they've got the dad there, they're married. It's in the convenience of the church. It's consecrated by God, and because of their upbringings of the mother and the father, the child's got a better chance of striving. Well, I'm not saying that single parents are going to be struggling to bring up their child, but what I do say is that if you are married and you have your son and or your daughter, and you've got a father and your mother, then you've got a better chance of striving.
John?
I'm not sure that there's any statistics that suggest that Christians are somehow staying married more than atheists, for example, if that's what we're suggesting, or secular people. I don't think that's the case. Yes, of course, some of the things you're saying are true, but the idea that the only variable between the time when every family was together and there were picket fences